We've had a review on Apple Podcasts. I don't know if you saw this yesterday.
All right.
From an unnamed person, because I'm not going to give these people credit. I listen because there isn't a better podcast for rugby league. Right, so it starts well, but because there's always a but. That says more about the poor standard of broadcasting in our sport than the quality of this podcast.
Wow, savage.
Without the one articulate member of the team who carries the podcast, this would be verging on poor. I mean, I'm assuming they're talking about you, Phil, because you.
No.
I'd say it was you. I mean, obviously, Richard, not to be disrespectful, but I'd say it's Phil.
I mean, I've got a degree, but it's a Mickey Mouse one, so, I can't.
A degree's a degree.
With honours.
Well, then.
It has been reassessed, though, to an O level.
Don't get me started.
I don't think it's even that. I feel very sorry for the kids who have worked very hard and have been done over by algorithms. Because I didn't try my A-levels because I'd given up at that point. But I think the people who, you hate to see people try and not get the rewards they deserve.
It's not even about that. It's the backlash of it all, isn't it? Like, yeah, they've done a major U-turn, but what about the kids that have already been refused their universities? What about all the university places that are already full because of the last 5 days? Oh, honestly, I need to.
You need to get on a field and smash some people.
That'd be lovely, wouldn't it?
It would be. This is 4020 Not Live. Recording on a Tuesday this week because did you go to the diversity training for the media, Phil? Because I wasn't invited.
I did. It wasn't so much training. It was more of a talking shop about what should we do and how do we best do it. So, yes. There you go.
I, of course, have already been through the actual training as a member of staff at a club, so I've been through that. So that was good. As we said for weeks, though, it's okay standing or kneeling or putting your fist in the air or whatever, but the sport actually has to do something rather than just talk. And I don't know how many people work at the RFL at the moment, but if someone wants to make some money for the sport, I know we've got this loan from the government, but they could do well going back through the tweets of many people involved in our sport, some on coaching staffs at Super League clubs, and see the blatant racism out there and do something about it. Or we could just, ignore it.
I think there's some people we need to pay credit to at the start of this podcast. The first one I think should be Andrew Johns' father. It's great of him to sponsor Super League. I'm hoping that Tommy Makinson isn't going for the meatball option. But
wow,
Wigan's gesture to put Rob Burrow on their shirt and a word that he meant to each of the players, which I believe are going to be auctioned off at a later date. Magnificent. That's what we're about as a sport. Thought Huddersfield were extremely clever when it came to the Black Lives Matter movement. It's not something that we need to go over again and again. I think people know where we individually and as a programme stand on it. I think it might have been Matangi, because he felt that he didn't want to kneel, he sat cross-legged. Now, again, as the camera panned across the stadium, it gives that sense of unity. So there are ways of as a sport, with dealing with it. And I also think that I was very, very fortunate to be in the stadium this weekend. And it's reaffirmed, probably more than ever, why we love this sport. Because when you can only hear the physicality of the hits, and you see somebody like Johnny Lomax, who really should know better, going anywhere near someone who is 6 times the size of them, taking them down, and you can audibly hear the smack reverberate around the stadium. And you sit there as a mere mortal going, what on earth do these people put themselves through this for? We just need to reevaluate. And I've seen a lot of understandable fans on social media criticising coaches and players and who's at fault for their team not playing well at the moment and form going out of the window. But we've become a little intolerant, and I think that probably needs to change.
So it's keyboard warriors, Danika. They're everywhere.
You don't have to get me started, don't you? You love it. Just drop a little bit of bait in there, and I'm all yes. Yeah. Do you know what? It's difficult, isn't it? Because you're in a sport where the fan base is crucial for the sport's success, and therefore fans are gonna have an opinion. Everyone's gonna have an opinion. But dare I say it, and be controversial. Sometimes they're as fickle as can be, because no, I'm in there. 1 week a team's doing amazingly well, and they're the best team in the world. The next team, 1 or 2 people might not do so great, and we're rubbish, and it's the coach's fault. And I've seen some stuff this week that Richard Agar needs to leave. I thought, why?
He's only just got the job.
I mean, you need to be consistently poor in order to be a poor coach or manager or whatever. And granted, the Leeds Rhinos have not been great. I'm not one to beat around the bush. But then if you look at the significant change in players or the situation or whatever, you cannot blame a coach for the next few months for how their team perform, really. Yes, we want to win, and yes, we want to do well, but it's such a maverick random time that just back off and leave them alone.
I'm not going to defend Wakefield's performance when we get to it, Phil, but
no,
they're almost, as we've seen for the last week, and we'll talk about why that in a moment, because we'll talk about the games themselves first. These fixtures, these performances, everything around the game at the moment, I think people have to remember, as important as it is that your team wins and the glory and all that, these games very much are there to fulfill a contract, because without it, we're doomed.
I think we'll go back to what we said right at the beginning of resumption, that whoever wins this is going to be thoroughly worthy to be called champions, because they will have overcome some logistical issues that no club has ever had to overcome before. I look at the way St Helens have returned after the resumption, and the fact that whilst points are being liberally splayed around most games at the moment, to have not conceded for 180 minutes is astonishing, and would be astonishing at any time. But other than that, the same people that were saying, 3 weeks ago, that Catalans were appalling when they played St Helens and looked like they were still on the plane, are now saying Catalans are a shoe-in for the semi-finals. So, apart from accepting that Saints probably are ahead of everybody else at the moment in the way that they're playing, and they played predominantly with a very settled team since they came back. I think they've only used 18 players, maybe 19. This is exceptional times, and most teams will have a moment in the sun, and those same teams, possibly even the following week, will look like it's in the middle of a downpour. But we cannot, again, watching players emerge from a suite up in the gods instead of a dressing room, not being able to warm up with any crowd noise when they come out, having to observe protocols during the week that they never have before, having seen the fragility of the sport because of what's happened with Hull. We are in a mode of survival. And if every club and every player can get through to the end of the season, then nothing else matters.
But this is it. So I go back to the whole fan things. I think, as much as I probably upset a few people saying that, I think the fans need to remember, you have got Rugby League back. Now, whether your team are doing well or not, you have the sport that you love or like watching or however you want to see it, you've got it back at a lot of cost at the minute. Like you say, look at Hull, and yet they're still trying to overcome that so they can continue playing. Yes, for the sport, we're not a rich and hugely sponsored sport in that respect. So that needs to come back for that. But also the fans still have something to watch every weekend now, and it's like every weekend is a magic weekend, isn't it? It's like they're stacked full. There's loads of games every day. They can go to the pub if you can book in or whatever on a Sunday and watch 2 or 3 games. Happy days. Be grateful of that in a way. Take a minute to realise what, you just look on social media and watch Alex Sutcliffe at Leeds trying to take his tests every week, or he thinks it's vile, he hates it, he gets a bit anxious about it, and he's choking up most of the time. So if anyone's had a COVID test, you'll know how disgusting they are and how painful it. And it's painful. It feels like your nose is burning when it goes up. So can you just take a moment to appreciate that they are going through changes themselves in order to bring the sport back for you and for us as a sport to continue to grow?
A big hello to all our listeners on the Total RL forums. I can't listen to the 4020 Live podcast because it's comparable to listening to that group of old men you seem to get in every village pub that aren't happy about anything and put everything down. So thank you very much.
We are the last of the summer wine of rugby league, as we've said.
Which also went on forever and ever and ever.
Do you know, I'm keen for that. I'm absolutely keen. But quite clearly, you've listened. So therefore, you like it. So you secretly like the old men in the pub. So either listen and deal with it, or just shh.
I mean, you've become the Dame Thora Heard of this programme. They always used to put on the titles at the start, special guest appearance from, even though she was on every week.
Lucky you didn't say Nora Batty then, to be fair.
Oh, do you know what? I've been called worse. I'll take anything. I'm in a right whinge today, so.
Oh, that's perfect.
They've got the best of it.
The thousands of people who do listen, and more than 1,000 means I can say thousands. They wouldn't come back if they didn't enjoy this utter nonsense, would they?
Do you know what entertains me, boy? So I enjoy speaking to you.
Well, that's good then. One person likes us. That's good. I think someone listening to the show I did with Andrew Foster last week, the Bulls fan who is fairly negative about certain things about the running of his club, and decided that was all of us. We're all negative. We're all, he made some good points. If you haven't heard that, or Sandy, who was our celebrity Canadian person, go back and listen to those shows.
She's great, isn't she, Sandy?
She is. I mean, you say the fragility of the sport, and college football in America, which is ridiculously huge, that appears to be cancelled. The Canadian football season, as in the CFL, as in their version of American football, their version of rugby league, if you will, has been cancelled for 2020. So, as you say, we should feel a degree of gratefulness that this sport is somehow being played. 4 games at the weekend, all 2 of them as we expected, 2 of them thrown up in the air on Wednesday, and Castleford Tigers drew the short straw, but didn't necessarily show that. Going to St Helens, 0-0 at half-time. They defended well throughout. A word on our former colleague Ollie Holmes, 59 tackles. If he'd done it at Wembley, they'd name a bar after him. But he just gets to be interviewed after the game on the telly. And it was his birthday last week as well, so happy birthday, Ollie. We'll talk about Castleford in a moment. We'll talk about the Saints' performance first. Christian Woolf saying they've got plenty to do in terms of taking their opportunities, but they were made to work very hard by Castleford to get any opportunities at all.
Thought the patience that they showed was fantastic. I think in Alex Wormsley, they've got someone that is defying what we're currently being told about the new rules. We keep, being trotted out the line that there's no place for big forwards anymore. I venture to suggest that Alex is playing as well as anyone in his position in the world. They were put under the most extreme pressure by Cass. It was an incredible performance considering who they had out. And the scrambling defence was magnificent as well. But Saints just did what Saints do, and they kept creating chances, and they only had one that they scored from, but they took it magnificently. Now, Lachlan Coote is organising from behind fantastically. Theo Fage was thwarted in virtually everything he did until the 1 minute that it really mattered, and he was on the end of it. I just think the balance they've got across their team is fantastic. James Bentley, again, form player of the last couple of weeks, fits in wherever you want him to play. He's aggressive. He's in your face. They're just a joy to watch at the moment. And I think what would have really pleased him, Wolf, he may not have said it afterwards, was that it was a different way of winning. Now, the week before, virtually every break they made led to a try. They could be fast and expansive the way they love to play. This week, they had to arm wrestle. They had to stay in the fight. They had to believe in their processes. And they did. They are an absolute joy to watch at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, they ground it out, didn't they? That first half was, and quite nice to see the fact that they had to fight for it, and it just shows their ability as a squad. You know, that whole keeping their cool and just, like you say, you just keep trugging away, don't they? They was made difficult for them, which was great, made for a better kind of showpiece and entertainment. But essentially, they did really keep their cool. You know, they had a few knocks and things with, you know, James Graham and stuff, and that could have potentially changed a lot of it. Alex Walmsley, both of their forwards took a knock quite early, didn't they? But yet still remained and kept their cool. Their bench is so strong. Like, you want to start your strongest forward pack, but their bench is incredibly strong. And then you see resilience pays off, doesn't it? And then at the end, they just start taking it away. Well, they're just great to watch, whether you like them or not. You can't deny that, can you?
The longer a game goes on, when you are defending a zero, Danika, how much pressure do you put on yourselves to make sure you don't let anyone through, even if the game's won by 50 points or whatever? How much pressure do you put on yourselves to make sure you don't concede a single point?
I think that becomes one of the main focuses, weirdly. I remember last season we did, I think, 3 or 4 games, and it was over like a Challenge Cup run as well. And we'd nilled maybe 3 teams. And that was the focus going in. Like, you are, you know, however long it was, you know, 160 minutes, you know, 240 minutes without scoring a point past you. Let's keep this up. And it becomes a pride thing, doesn't it? Because we were very good, we are very good at Leeds Rhinos defensively, and we like the really tight, pressurised defensive moments where it's on the line. But yeah, that became the focus quite a bit, and it's a pride thing. Like, how good is it to win? But how good is it to win whilst keeping the score to 0? And it's that first try that somebody gets past you after that period is quite a big blow. It's kind of like, you know, when you're at the end of a game and somebody at levels with you, it feels like that. Well, for us, it did anyway. So, you know, it's pride in the fact that in attack, you know, that Saints can work wonders with that ball. They've got, you know, you can't really single out anybody that directly such an incredible tune. And that's what I think defence is. You work together as a unit, and you have to trust people more than you trust them in attack. And you have to have somebody's shoulder. You have to be prepared to put your body on the line, move back quickly when you're tired, especially as a forward. Like, if you're battering down the middle or somebody's battering you in the middle, to be able to jump up and jump back into place quickly for that next play. That's the trust that they have, and the team, you know, that they must have now is just, it's something else. It does put you, I mean, they are a class level above everybody else, but that's just that next strike, isn't it, to prove how great they are as a squad.
I think we have to pay tribute to James Roby as well, because 500 games. Yeah. Again, it's a ridiculous landmark, but 500 games, the way he plays the sport. And he proved it again, you know, when it looked as though that game could have gone either way in the latter stages. And even at 4-0, you were thinking Cass could quite easily nick this.
Yeah.
That, you know, Saints will make a mistake and Castle feast off it. They put Roby back on. And actually, all of a sudden, that solidity in the middle of the field is there. The work rate that he's done in every game he's ever played to reach 500 the way he plays the sport is phenomenal.
He hasn't taken his foot off, has he? Like, you get to a certain point when you see that kind of, what an incredible effort. But I don't think he's changed much in the way he plays. He hasn't really slowed down. He's just an absolute specimen of a guy. Like, what an athlete. And it makes me think of, like, Jamie Jones with Cannon in a way. Like, he maybe didn't play as many minutes towards the end of his career as he'd want to, but yet didn't ever stop working as hard as he could when he was on the field. And different positions, obviously, completely different kind of skill and ability level. But that's a real, like, stalwart of the game, I think, isn't it? Somebody that puts in that much effort for themselves, for the team, everything, every single week, and not only on the pitch.
I think it's about influence as well.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, that, you know, Chris Lawrence is retiring from West Tigers, been announced at the end of this season.
Yeah.
He's just played half the number of games that Roby has, but people are complimenting him as much on what he brings in the dressing room. And he's saying he learned that from the likes of Gareth Ellis. And I guess it's what we who don't play and fully understand is known as professionalism.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the attitude you bring to training. It's the influence you have on young people. And Saints have, we're almost moulded on Sunday in the image of the guy who has played 500 games for them.
It's mad, isn't it? Like, he wouldn't, as a player coming up through the Saints ranks, to play alongside Roby. There's so many young kids coming through that have watched him as young lads and fans that are now playing alongside him. You can't help but be in awe / motivated or inspired, or again, I think that's the thing for me. Like, the only thing I can relate it to is like the likes of Andy Dobson and Lois Forsell. If you're on the pitch with them, you want to work hard because you know that they work hard, if that makes sense. Like Lois Forsell, completely led by example on the field and off the field in the changing rooms, was super passionate about it. So therefore, you want to work for her, and it's a similar role. It's such a crucial role as well. But yeah, like, what an inspirational character for the lads coming through, not only in the Saints but in the Super League in general.
I think it's something Scoy's mentioned about his career, how he was always looking to be that 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 consistent player, and that's probably, I'm not saying Roby's downfall, but we've said before on the show that perhaps at times he hasn't got the credit he deserves, although he's getting it now, because he is just consistently good week in, week out. You can't think of a game where you think, oh, Roby's had a stinker today, can you? Because he's just that good a player.
I think that's why he means so much to his teammates. He's not doing it so that, John Davidson can give him 8 in League Weekly when there was such a paper. He knows he can go in on a Monday morning after a game with his head held high, and the rest of the guys in that dressing room will look to him as, the right way of preparing for a game and rehabilitating after a game, and just to have him around the club. He's a quiet sort of a guy. He's not one of the ones that's going to come in and shout and bawl. He leads by example. And he's taken 1 or 2 knocks in his career, but he's never let injury affect him, or the form of the team, the losing in grand finals, and he has just turned up and done the absolute best every single day, whether it's been in the public eye or it hasn't been in the public eye. And I think he is the kind of bloke that we already need to be thinking as a sport, how do we best use him as an ambassador when he is no longer playing, and it's in 2 years, 5 years, whenever he decides that his body can't take it anymore, we have to keep people like James Roby involved in the sport.
Oh yeah, 100%. He's just, like I say, like, he's inspirational not only for the guys, for the women, and like you say, he's not a character as such, if that makes sense. Like, he's not like a Luke Gale or Conrad as such. They're just using them as examples. That he's there to do a job, and obviously clearly enjoys doing it, and that's it. And he's a workhorse, isn't he? He's fab.
Well, we got told off last year for not talking about Saints enough because they just were boringly winning week in, week out, apart from when they played London. I guess they've got that same aura about them again, and they didn't start the season well, but they have, since the return, looked the champion side, and I guess we are going to be spending the next few weeks, well, not next week, but going forward, speaking about how good they are until they slip up again. But even if they do slip up, you expect them to be back at that level the week after.
They didn't start the season well, but they did very nearly win the World Club Challenge. And you speak to any team that has played in that game, win, lose, or, well, you can't draw. It takes a lot out of you, physically, emotionally, trying to peak within a couple of weeks of the season starting, but peak at a level that you don't even play at on a week-to-week basis in Super League, because the team that you're playing is a class apart. It's just so difficult. So I don't buy too much into they were inconsistent before the shutdown. I think the shutdown has enabled them almost to restart their season without having to worry about the World Club Challenge. The interesting thing will be they will need to make some team changes. Every side will. At the moment, they've gone, as we said, with virtually the same, I think 19 players in total over 3 games. But clearly Makinson will get a ban. There'll be some kids that they'll want to bring in and play. But it's just the structure seems so good there that unless they have to do it wholesale, they're going to be there, and they deserve to be there, because they're the benchmark team at the moment.
And also, why would you not want to speak about them? Obviously, I don't hide the fact that I'm a Rhinos fan, a Rhinos player, whatever, but they are the epitome of rugby league athlete at the minute. Every single one has a squad, individually. There are some incredibly talented players in that team, and that's who you talk about. You either talk about, as some of our fans is a loose term really when you're talking about them negatively, but there's some people out there that like to speak about the negative side to people and who's not doing very well, and then you speak about who's doing really great. You never speak about the middle ground. So us speaking about Saints is because they are the best at the game at the minute. And like I said, I reckon at the minute, if they were to do that World Cup challenge again, I don't know if they'd pip it. Well, Roosters are not in a great position, are they, anyway? So that's beside the point. But they are on such form. I think, yeah, they do look better. But coming off the season when you've won and you've achieved a lot in one season, to come back and the expectation is so high that it is hard to get restarted, because people are expecting so much from the off, and they forget that the off season, and you've mixed around a bit, or you've lost players, you've gained players, whatever. So yeah, they maybe weren't as what people expected, but like you said, they had the World Cup challenge. They came off the back of a good season. The break has done nothing but good for Saints, and why not speak about how good they are? We're rugby league fans, and we want to see the game, and we want to see who's best in the game. So that's what we're doing.
We do. Darragh Powell said after the game that Castleford perhaps not too far away from being grand finalists again themselves. Obviously had to do it tough this week. Obviously preparing initially for a game against Hull FC, not playing against them, having to play against the champions. Maybe he played against Hull KR if that had come off, but he obviously didn't. Their schedule thrown up in the air and fallen down. Jake Truman gets a knock before the game as well. Castleford and Wakefield and Catalans and St Helens have all stood up this week and done the best they can for the sport in general, Phil, and they should all be applauded for that, even though they all came out with different varying performances, but they've all done the best they can to keep this sport going.
And that's what we were saying at the beginning in our round the houses preamble about we're too intolerant. The fact is that that's all that matters at the moment, that sport is out there, that the clubs are doing what they can and adapting as best they can to circumstances that may well change for everybody over the course of the next few weeks. We haven't yet got into the logistics of taking teams to France, which is clearly going to happen. And, some of those fixtures will be midweek fixtures, which adds again an extra layer of how do you prepare for that? Who do you take on those trips? What we need to do is acknowledge the fact that coping with situations outside of the norm is now the norm. I thought Cass were absolutely magnificent. And again, too many people, after they fell away to the Dragons for the second half of that game, were writing them off. And Darragh Powell even said after that game, seen some signs. We'll learn from that. We'll be all right. We'll be better. He brings in Gareth O'Brien, which I think you have to say, you probably don't realise how much a bespoke fullback is to a team until A, they haven't got one, and then B, they get one. And that wasn't yet Zach Hardacre in 2017. But what it was somebody at the back who was ultra dependable. Yeah. Somebody who hasn't played for 5 months, who put in a fantastic performance like that to knit them all together, but a defensive attitude on their own line that was just ridiculously commendable. They got as close as any team will get this year to unsettling St Helens. Now, Saints may well get beaten in the game, but for 74 minutes, Cass really got under their skin. You could see the Saints players were going, we've tried all these moves before. Most teams have broken under them, and this team will not go away. And you thought, this is set for Danny Richardson to do something right at the end against his old club to take the game away from them. And the balance, the youth, the attitude, all of that would have pleased Darragh Powell. And of course, he'll rue the odd opportunity that was missed. But defensively, if you can be as solid as that on your own line for so long under these new rules of playing where the ball's in play for so much longer, that's got to stand you in good stead. If you've done it without a couple of your top players as well, so much the better, because when they come back, you're only going to be improved.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's about building your squad. Like, you might not have the team result that you want, but it's about the team performance. And like you say, bringing somebody in that hasn't played, and then thinking about who's out. Where's your team, or where's that team going to be in a couple more weeks' time? You know, when people are back, or, you know, I know this week we've had quite a few of the match reviews and stuff, and it's going to affect quite a few teams. But you've got to look at the bigger picture, I guess, in a way, haven't you? And think, now, where are you going to slot that certain person back in? Who's going to go where? Are you going to keep them? You know, and I think you've got to look at, we are, a few weeks into the new format, like you say, this is the new norm for the foreseeable. Lots of things that will chop and change now that the players are adapting with. And that's massive. Like, I think we need to stop and just take a moment to appreciate, from going and thinking you're playing Hull FC and the preparation that takes to then going and playing the champions. It's a huge change in, like, psychological dynamic as well. And that's what we talked about the other week about the changing rooms and the game day prep. You're now prepping for Hull FC, who you think are potentially, you know, you always think you're going to beat somebody, you've got to do, but the way that you're going to beat them, or your nerves you might have, is huge. So much more potential for weeks to come, as long as we can get a hold and make sure that everything that's happening is resolved and we've got a clear pathway. Then there's some exciting games to come in the next few weeks, I think.
Some very exciting games, but go on. So sorry, Phil.
I was just going to say, I think one of the other players that I would pay credit to, which epitomises, it doesn't matter where you play, it's the attitude that you bring to the game, was Alex Foster, who, again, you know, will not have played a lot of his career as a centre, but didn't look out of place in the finest of company. And if it's an attitude thing, you know, if you do prepare to play a team forward dominated because it's Hull, and then you're playing a team that's more athletically based, which is St Helens, what you want is the attitude of the guys that you're picking to say, it doesn't matter who we're playing, I know I've got to be at my best, and all the things that I've been taught through my career I've got to bring to whoever my opponent is, whether I'm told the day before, a week before, or 6 months before. And I thought, you know, he didn't get many plaudits, but I just thought his attitude summed up Castleford.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the team buy-in, isn't it? That's your team values, your ethos, your morale, whatever that team buy-in is, regardless of where you play, regardless of what you do, you have to buy into that squad and buy into that team. It's like taking a player and changing them from starting to being on the bench. It hurts. Like, I've been there, like when you change around. But at the end of the day, your team ethos is what you go by and what your team stands for, and that's what you got to buy into.
So some very exciting games coming up, as I was about to say. One person who won't be involved in those very exciting games, unless he's on the telly, is Tommy Makinson, who Liam Watson's not had a great run, has he? Almost like chopped his arm off with a saw or whatever he did, and now he's at the Checkham. Make sure they're both still there after Makinson grabbed his testicles. I think we can say that. Grade F.
What an idiot.
Tommy the Squirrel Makinson.
Just what an idiot. What an idiot.
Again, you got to see a lot more of it probably in close-up and gory replay on the television than at the ground. You see a player placed on report and immediately going, did anybody see anything? So it wasn't immediately obvious what had happened. So the first thing you think when you realise what it is that's been put on report is, was there real provocation? You know, was he in a chokehold and he felt that the only way he could raise the attention of his potential assailant was to go for his most sensitive part? And the more you see the replays of it, it doesn't appear as though there was a reason to do it, other than he thought he was out in the fields picking grapes or something. I don't know.
Well, you know, you can watch the replays on social media and they're slowed down and they're made to look a little bit worse and stuff, but they're not. He did what he did. Like, what was he thinking? And I get it. Like in times of frustration, sometimes you do stupid things. Like we saw then, Blake Austin stick his foot out or whatever when he lost the ball. Yeah, it's a time of frustration, and there's an element where I can kind of go, I understand, but also, I, you're an idiot. You're an absolute idiot. Because not only do you look an idiot for doing that, and the various stick he's going to get from that, let's be fair, for the rest of the season, if not later on in years to come, but also, it's on film, it's being filmed, you're live on TV, and also, it's just, I'm huge into sportsmanship, and I just think if you've been tackled fair and square or whatever, just take it. It's part of the game. You're going to get tackled. You're going to lose a ball. You're going to have try scored against you. Take it. And if you don't like it, don't play the sport. You are an absolute idiot for lashing out like that. And he's going to get a huge ban. It's going to affect them. And yeah, they've got enough on the bench and some youngsters coming through. But he is one of their class players. So impact on that now isn't. I'm idiot. That's all I've got to say.
I'm not sure you can use the word tackled anymore either.
Oh, well, there we go as well. See, it's just going to be innuendo after innuendo for months to come.
The great thing is that it produced some fantastic publicity for the sport. It was everywhere.
Yeah.
So well done, Tommy, in raising the profile of the sport. Enjoy it while you sit on your bum for 6 weeks.
Yeah, I hope people, because no doubt people have seen the clip that Gary Carter tweeted out. I hope people enjoyed the additional commentary on that clip. Don't know who he is, but Sky should sign him up. Described on the BBC as a low grab. Low
hanging fruit.
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't know. I don't know what to say anymore. For fear of trivialising this. This doesn't go on in the women's game, obviously, does it, Danika?
I mean, no, because that's not part of our genetics. But no, like, I think the worst thing we have is hair pulling. Honestly, I know that people might not think that, but when you're running and somebody pulls your hair at pace, it not only hurts your head where your hair is, but it's like getting major whiplash. So that's the only thing that I think is really comparable. I've been once accidentally stood on when I was playing rugby union over a ruck.
Well, that's the whole sport, though, of rugby union. That's just
but apart from that, I think hair pulling, and that's really difficult. If you've got a girl with long hair and you tackle them a little bit higher than normal, it looks like you're pulling the hair. But when somebody, like I got, and it wasn't me, I think it was Courtney, I think, in it was Castleford, and somebody just saw her hair and grabbed it, and her head flew. But then nobody got called up for it because obviously, as you well know, there wasn't much of in the way of women's match reviews then.
You've mentioned it now, and that means you'll get all the people slagging you off again for
I'm here all week, guys.
Don't do that. So that was Saints. They beat Castleford 10-0. Both get the week off now because Castleford should have been playing in the Challenge Cup this week. Dowell Powell, I asked him in the press conference after the game about they're going to have a build-up of fixtures. They're going to have to play this Challenge Cup game at some point in the future. Talking about duty of care and player welfare and all this stuff, Phil, rugby union and rugby league, we've taken stuff from each other over the years. They've got this rule where one of the sanctions that's available to them is to award a game as a 20-0 loss if a team can't fulfill a fixture for COVID-19 related reasons. I'm not putting any blame on any individual or whatever at Hull, but it's almost as if we should have brought in something like this ourselves because we haven't got enough time to put this season together properly anyway. We're going to have midweek fixtures, as we said, extra pressures on players. Yes, it's unfortunate if you want to put it like that, but it's more unfortunate on Castleford, who've done absolutely nothing wrong here and will be punished by having these extra fixtures to fit in.
What is unfortunate, and again, I haven't sort of had it explained as to why, is that Castleford aren't playing this weekend. We know a free Sunday. We could now bring forward some Super League fixtures from later in the year that we know are going to cause logistical issues. So you could have 3 games played this Sunday, all on our primary broadcasters channel. So they've got a Super Sunday. We were told that August was our shop window. Yes, it goes back to the conversation we've already had about you're preparing for one thing, but come game day, you've got something else. But if, having realised midway through last week that there was only going to be one game on a Saturday on the BBC for the Challenge Cup, we should have brought forward 3 Super League games to play at Huddersfield, which was booked for the other Challenge Cup game on the Sunday anyway. Hull KR, play one game and have 3 weeks off, but at some point we'll have to play 4 games in 16 days. Either look at the next round of the Cup, which has already been drawn, and maybe pull one of those or 2 of those games forward, or take 3 Super League games, include a Castleford, who obviously, or any teams that have lost their Toronto fixtures early in the season. And why aren't we playing this weekend? Why haven't we got Super League? And I'm sure Darryl Powell will say it's not ideal to not know until a Monday before who you're playing or where you're playing, but I'd rather do that than, have to travel in midweek and rotate the squad because we're playing, Thursday, Monday, Friday.
What is the answer? Like, it's all, there's period. I can't get my words out now. There's arguments for both, isn't there? Because it's player welfare, and yes, bringing the fixtures forward and having a weekly fixture, but also then is there scope to have this break and to have the weekend off as well? Because it's not the same level and it's not the same intensity, so I can completely appreciate that. But at the women's game, we might play 4 games back to back, and the week off that we have, we could fit in a fixture or we could fit something in. But actually, it's really, really nice just to have the time off, and we don't play at the same intensity, we don't train at the same intensity, and I can appreciate that week off is really good for you, for the team, for the players. Anybody carrying a couple of knocks, it gives them that extra the weekend and stuff. So it's a really fine line between the player welfare of playing too many games at the end of the season or trying to fit them all in whenever, versus, because they would have had this weekend in as an off, wouldn't they? As soon as Toronto came out and rescheduled. So is it things like they've booked in family time, or I know that sounds really not important and stuff, but actually for having time off, and especially for the wives and partners and whatever else, that's a weekend off. So there's a really fine line for player welfare in the sense that, yes, you don't want to play them too many games too soon, rotate your teams, which is the logistical side of the rugby, but also you need to think about the bigger picture. And that's just where I think that's the difficulty of it.
And obviously, we hope everyone at Hull, players and staff, are okay and there's no long-term complications or whatever. It's an issue of communication again in this story, because the statement comes out late on a night saying, all these Hull players have got tested positive for COVID-19. Immediately everyone goes on social media, because that's what we do. People find evidence of Hull players having a party on social media because they've been foolish enough to do it, post it, that is. Scotty said to us a million times, if there'd been camera phones around in his day, the things that the players got up to then, but they didn't. So the players know that if the players go out into Hull and go, like the Aberdeen footballers, and go to a bar, then they're stupid, aren't they? If you have a party at home and you post the evidence on social media, you're stupid. Now, they're saying that it's nothing to do with that. That's fine. And it's a player who went to hospital to see a sick child, and if they'd have come out and said that when they released the statement, because Hull will have known that statement was coming out, as would Super League, because they released it themselves, why didn't they come out and just say that story in the first place, rather than leave it 12 hours till your chairman goes on Radio Humberside and stop the ambiguity? Because I just don't understand the communication elements of this sport sometimes, Phil, confuses me massively, and that's where people will go on social media and make their own narratives up.
Yeah, but also, where was the instruction to players not to have a weekend off or not to have a gathering if they're meeting as a squad? And if you see a lot of the social media from the players, a lot of them have been out to coffee shops or to bars or whatever else. Should that have come from higher up and said, if we are to play, you know, Super League is to come back, we need you to adhere to a certain level of social distancing, which is more so than what the government have put out. And that comes down because nobody's told. You think about the age of some of these players. You've got 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, and that's what they are. Even the 20, 21-year-olds, they're still young and essentially, I'm 35,
31, 32. Yeah.
35 and still, doing what I want to do. And there's a really fine line there because they weren't told not to.
I think there's something else as well. And heaven forbid if anybody got the security camera footage from Stoggies in the late 80s, early 90s, Scully would be in trouble. The issue is, imagine you're an overseas player. So your whole network is based around some of your friends at the club. So you're in lockdown in a foreign country. You're not allowed to do the things that you would normally do, but you're 12,000 miles away from home. So your support network just isn't there. Unless the guidance is absolutely crystal clear. And it's not even so much from the clubs, and this isn't making a political point, but actually it is, that everybody you speak to at the moment is not 100% sure of what they are and aren't allowed to do. That things have got to such a laissez-faire place that people are saying, the virus hasn't really affected me or where I live, so I'm sort of wary of it, but I don't need to be as aware of it that I would be if I was told that I could only visit this place at that time, or I could only associate with that person that time. It's very vague. Even the phrase bubble is extremely vague. And the truth is, what's probably come out of this whole scenario is that because of cost, we don't test enough. And the thing about that is, we test enough to pick up the disease once people have got it. But the corollary of that is once you've got to that point, the restrictions all of how long you've got to be in quarantine for, who else is in place for isolation, that's all taken care of by Public Health England or whatever it's called today, Dido Society or whatever it is. So the players have. I have an element of sympathy for anybody at the moment that is trying to understand exactly what it is that they should and shouldn't do. They live in the communities that they play in. They go shopping in supermarkets where they're going to bump into people who clearly are not within their bubble. They're encouraged to do that at the moment by the restrictions that we live under. It's going to be very hard for a club to say stay at home all day every day if the government is telling you that they're encouraging people to go back to work. So I sort of get it. There's too many contradictions out there at the moment, and I do have sympathy for the fact that yes, in terms of the word professional, maybe you should go to training, go home, stay at home, go to a match, come back from a match, stay at home. But you can't expect people to do that.
Well, this is the thing, but you're not only just thinking about the players in Super League now. So if the players, and like you say, the Islanders particularly, and the Australians and stuff, they gather together because that's their network, that's their hub.
Exactly.
But is Super League therefore a bubble? Because at one point you're all going to play each other anyway. But then that aside, for all the players that have got partners, wives, girlfriends, whatever, who all have jobs, they're still going to work and they're still coming home. Their children have been going to school or playing at a playground now because they're allowed to do that. There's too many variables and not enough money. And that's the problem. It's like I met up with Hannah Butcher, who I play with. She's Kirklees. And I made a joke and I was like, are you allowed to come and meet me now? And she said she had to put a mask on, or her granddad, had to put a mask on to go to the shop to buy his Sunday paper and speak to the guy behind the till who also had a mask on. But 3 hours later, they were in the pub together without masks on because the rules state you're not allowed to go around to somebody's house, but you're still allowed to go to the pub with them. So if the government can't get the rules right, how the hell can we expect the Super League, the RFL, to therefore get the rules right? And I don't want, and God forbid anything happens to the whole players, Salford players, whatever. Nobody wants that. But also, stop berating the players for relaxing their time off. And that's what I think it comes down to, because I don't think anybody can say to us what the rules are as a government, as a general population, never mind as an athlete and a Super League player. Told you I'm on a bit of a roll today.
But here's another thing. You know, we're talking about the need for crowds to come back to be economically viable. So aside from the health imperative, our clubs have backloaded their season in the hope that they can get some revenue from having crowds back in. So you would think that the first sort of test events would be outdoors, where it's relatively easy to socially distance people, where we're told you don't need a mask if you're outdoors in the same way that you're in a confined space indoors. So what's the first event that we allow fans back into? The World Snooker Championships, which is indoors.
And non-league football.
The mixed messages are, you know, it's almost impossible. I wouldn't want to be the chief executive of a Super League club at the moment, because how can you plan ahead with when the messages you're getting from the central government that licenses what you're allowed to do doesn't appear to follow a logical process?
Non-league football not allowed crowds. Village cricket allowed crowds. I don't know. All I would say is, you know, and I tend to agree with Sam Tompkins' tweet last week on this one. You've got to have a bit of common sense. You know, don't go to pubs, don't go to nightclubs or whatever. That's just common sense. But again, you just have common sense over your use of social media as well, because people will jump to conclusions if you allow them to. And again, if you know the reason why there might be this outbreak, then tell us straight away. Don't leave ambiguity, because people will want to think the worst of people. As I say, we wish everyone well at Hull. It's good news that no one at Salford tested positive last week, and you know, there but for the grace of whoever.
I think the concern, as we record this, for me, the worry would be that the numbers at Hull have gone up, which clearly says that the symptoms take a little bit of time to come out. And again, that would absolutely, well, we said it last week, the priority number one is that everybody is safe and as well as they can be and comes through this, and rugby is secondary to all of that. And if it means changing some fixtures, that's the least of anybody's concerns. It has to be health and welfare. And but a very interesting piece by Gareth Ellis in his column in the Yorkshire Post, again saying that there hasn't been enough concern about the welfare of the people that have got the symptoms. He's not one of them, but clearly he had expected and rightly expected a little bit more sympathy from within the game, as you know, first and foremost, get well. But the worry would be it was 6 people and net players, and now it's 9, isn't it, net players and staff. Yeah. And I think that. At the moment, that is how fragile the sport is, that just because, again, as we sit here recording this at the moment, Salford haven't had any cases, the next time they're tested, hopefully not, but they may have some. And it may well be that, you know, other clubs who've been in contact with the virus, their results will come out sometime after they've been tested, because we're only testing once a week and the symptoms lie dormant for a while. So I think we just need to be, I guess we said it at the beginning, you know, everybody just needs to be a bit more tolerant than it appears we are in terms of how we get the games on in the first place, how people play in them, the implications for lifestyle for the people that are making all the sacrifices. And the other thing we haven't mentioned at the moment is they're all doing this under massive pay cuts. So we're asking them to do more, to curtail and restrict themselves even more for less money. And we'd all find that incredibly difficult in our walk of life. So just be a bit more understanding, rugby league people. I think we are going to have to reevaluate that we're a family sport, because we're a very, very dysfunctional family at the moment.
Well, one who would have been on Jeremy Kyle, were he still a thing. What everyone loves to have a go at is match officials, and they were back in the spotlight again. The weekend, as we talk about Wigan versus Leeds. Leeds, of course, they can't go back and deduct that try, which shouldn't have been a try. But again, people go on social media, and again, current players go on social media. Current players of the teams playing in the game go on social media and criticise the touch judge for not noticing a foot on a line, but don't criticise their teammates for dropping the ball or getting sent off and stuff like that, because they're hypocrites. Wigan, they beat Leeds. I can't say I watched too much of this game because I was too busy trying to fix my laptop, but 2 wins in a row for Wigan, 2 defeats in a row for Leeds. Are you concerned, Phil? Obviously, you've got to be concerned. Leeds, they're rubbish again now.
I think the scoreline did blow out in the last 10 minutes, which did give the impression that perhaps it was more convincing than it actually was. For me, the difference between the teams, who were relatively evenly matched, were Jackson Hastings. Leeds had a lot of possession at the beginning of the second half, and you got the feeling that if they'd have scored then, perhaps the complexion of the game would have changed. But when it got to those moments, and Wigan had the opportunity to exploit a retreating defence or a line that wasn't set, Hastings invariably took the right option. And I think Hastings, in combination with Bevan French, was the difference between the two teams. Other than that, you look at the stats of the two teams, which Scully will tell you, the only one that matters is the scoreboard, but there is an indication of how individual players have played. They sort of match up. I think there were some people that said to me of the Leeds performance, I look at people like Reece Martin and he hasn't done anything, and then you look at the tackle count, he's made 40 tackles, he's the leading tackler in the game. Everybody's making a contribution in unforeseen circumstances, but there was a sharpness around the half-backs at Wigan that won them that game. I'm really happy to see somebody like Callum McClelland get given a chance and to develop into hopefully a player. At the moment, Callum is thinking about what he's doing before he does it. It's not instinctive because he's only just broken into the first team. And I'm pretty sure if we look back at footage of Danny Maguire when he was first in the team at Leeds, it would be the same. There's a period where you have to adjust to that level of football. And that means that Luke Gale is trying to look after him and play his own game as well. So, Wigan are a solid team who I think at some point will need to be a little bit more expansive if they're going to win the competition. Leeds have gone from being a team at the bottom of the table to probably a middle of the table team at the moment. So there's a little bit of progression. 7 of the 17 who played for Leeds have come through their academy system. It's a team that is relatively young at the moment. Ash Handley, I thought, was great at fullback, which again is not where he normally plays. Harry Newman looks like he's a real prospect. But Wigan have just got more of a unity around them. And they fully deserve to win. Actually, it was a really good game. I enjoyed it.
My tongue's firmly in my cheek, Danika, when I say Leeds are rubbish. But that is more of the Leeds we're going to see week in, week out than obviously the performance against St Helens, which they can do whatever they want, it seems, most weeks. Yeah,
I think, we can never. I'm never one for blaming match officials, so I'm not going to go for that one. And that decision was made. End of story. There's nothing that we can do about it. I think the only thing for Leeds for me were the simple basics. Like you say, Luke Gale can conduct his orchestra or however we're going to see it, and he can work above his station and manage that very well. Like you say, Ash out of position, bringing in the youngsters in and bringing them up, starting Tom, in the lineup initially. But then you go to your more experienced, older players, and it comes down to simple basics. Simple errors that have been caused by not just doing the basics right. And I'm not, I don't want to be one of those people that starts pointing fingers at players, and that's the reason. But there were a few times there's a couple of Leeds players that just didn't catch a ball, and they weren't particularly awful balls. They weren't difficult. They weren't hamstring killers. They weren't high in the air. And it comes down to could that then have progressed into something? Could you have finished that off, and could that have been an extra try? Or, even if you drop it in 20 metres up from your line, and people don't really think that could have influenced it. But what happens if you'd have got 60, 70 metres up the pitch off the back of that set and started in a different position, and therefore, Wigan would have been on the back foot trying to come down the pitch again. And it's just things like that you need to think about the consequences maybe of, an error or two. And I'm not saying Leeds were full of them. There were a couple from both teams, and Wigan last week we saw, when they played, the first 20 minutes was full of errors. And I think that could also be the deciding factor, because you make a couple of errors early on, and then you get a little bit nervous, and then the nerves then turn into, it's a negative energy for the players, and it's that mindset of thing of, and if you are surrounded by a very experienced team, like, and if you had maybe not Carl, maybe not Tom, Ash at fullback, I'm not saying they weren't any good, but if you have a more experienced team that play together day in, day out, they know how to deal with you when you make errors as well. Now, I'm not sure how confident Cal McClelland might be saying to Conrad Hurrell, "Oh, don't worry about that drop ball, mate. Take the next one in or whatever," because of the experience. Now, you're expecting as a team to not have any difference, but I know that Kira Bennett wouldn't come up to me and be like, "It's all right, mate, carry on," because she's younger and less experienced than me. So I don't know if that. Am I making excuses? Maybe so. I don't want to point fingers at players, because I don't think that's fair. Like, at the end of the day, I wasn't playing. I wasn't in that situation. I was on the pitch. But I think that makes a massive difference. If you have a small few basic errors and it becomes accumulative, then that costs you meters, which costs you yards, which costs you points potentially.
It's a shame for headline writers.
Which costs you energy under the new rules as well. I think the other thing is, conversely, Wigan had, I think Willie Isa pointed it out after the game, and he was fantastic. He really is a 7 or 8 out of 10 every week and doesn't get the credit he deserves. That Wigan had, was it half a dozen 19 and 20-year-olds? But I think the structure and the system that they're going into at the moment, they seem to fit into it almost seamlessly. Again, I don't want any more of our young players to go to the NRL than is absolutely necessary. But Ethan Havard was magnificent, and he looks to me like the absolutely prime next candidate for perhaps being on the radar of an NRL club. And he's only 18, 19, fresh out of the England academy team that beat the Australian schoolboys. So I think Wigan are more advanced in integrating younger players because their systems are so strong throughout the club, and that showed as well. That there was a greater cohesiveness and unity about the way they played than Leeds did. But Richard Agar just said, we didn't beat ourselves. We were beaten by the better team, but we hamstrung ourselves by making the mistakes that we made. And that's what it came down to. But as a competitive game, it was good. It was, and some of the skill that was shown. Yes, clearly Tom Briscoe stood on the line, but the pass from Matt Pryor was worth seeing again. And I think the try that Bevan French scored at the end of the first half, little chip over from Liam Marshall again. Not the first time he's done that. Sort of sized up the situation and kicked beautifully into space, and French's support play was fantastic. Hastings kicking into space late on. I don't care whether French may or may not have been offside. That was a beautiful conceived piece of skill that we should be absolutely celebrating.
Also, we need to point out there that as a fellow ACLer, Tom Briscoe to come back and to perform very well after having so much time off, after having a major reconstructive injury. I'm not saying that you're allowed to make errors as such, but he's still finding his feet again. And in terms of positionally, he'll know now that he, how far away. He's the first time he's played with some of these players, and it's first time for a long time. And to come back and perform and to come off unscathed as well. So just a little bit of a well done there for Tom.
And he's playing on the wrong wing. Compared to where he's playing, and he's also in the tradition of how we used to do in combination with Ryan Hall. He's taking a lot of those first and second carries, and if you've even got the slightest psychological doubt about the strength of your knee, running into a prop all the time probably is the best thing to test it out. But you must think twice before you do it.
But that's the thing, though, for him to come back and to do that. Like, I know I'm detracting from the original part of the conversation, but you've got that to add to Leeds' kind of bag there. He's an experienced player that would normally, he didn't look uncomfortable, did he? He didn't necessarily look out, But to have a doubt in a player like that, maybe he didn't. Like I know as soon as you get the first couple of hits in, your first hit, your first carry, and then you kind of ease back into it. But again, he's running against some very big players. So, congratulations to him. And like you said, I think his experience, unfortunately, has made, he's been moved around a little bit, and he's just got to take that on the chin, and they forget about the fact that he's essentially new to the sport again. That's how I felt anyway. But he's made it through unscathed, and unlike, unfortunately, Ryan and Carl, who then played their first game and had to take another 4 weeks off, I think, touch wood, that he's come out on top. So, well done.
I also think that the other thing that Jackson Hastings did that probably went a little bit unnoticed but was incredibly meritorious was he looked after Harry Smith. He was the senior player in that partnership and just said, look, at times in the game, to coin a Scoeyism, I'll take charge. You step back, leave it to me for 5 minutes. And when Hastings did that, he made Harry Smith's transition into the team a little bit easier. And that is to the credit of both him as an individual and Wigan in their structure and systems. And they're worthy winners. And I think if you were looking at how the top four is going to shape up for the end of the season, you'd say something major is going to have to happen for them not to be in the top four. The way the fixtures could well see Catalan with 7 games at home, some of those midweek that teams may well have to make a strategic decision about who they send out there. You'd think they're going to win most of those 7 home games. It's a hard enough place to go to at the best of times. That virtually puts them in the semi-finals. I put Wigan as the third team that looks likely to be in there. So, it's to their credit.
Speaking of players who work hard, don't always get the credit for it, but sometimes do. A landmark try for the Ginger Pearl, one of the great nicknames of Rugby League, in Liam Farrell, former man of the match in the grand final, of course. Don't know who that award's named after. But he's one of those players, Danika, who, if he's on your team and he's not there, you would miss him.
Well, I don't know, because everyone brings their own thing, don't they? Like I'm gonna try to take a more positive stance now, but everybody contributes something, whether it be your skill, your ability, whether it be turning up, whether it just be consistently being there if you need to be, But I think this is what we said at the start. You either see your really great players and you talk about them, or you talk about the really poor players who have not performed at all, and you don't really talk about that middle ground player that sometimes necessarily goes under the radar or you don't think contributes that much. So I think, as on a playing point of view, I have to be more what's the word I'm looking for? Diplomatic?
Probably.
No, because I've had games where I don't think you could perform particularly well, but I might have contributed to somebody by saying well done or picked them up or whatever. So I'm going to be a fence sitter when it comes to that, I'm afraid.
Well, it's allowed. It is allowed.
I'm not often one though, I think. So
I don't know. I think that's why I ask these questions, you see.
Everybody contributes something, and whether we see it as spectators or not, everybody contributes something.
And he's clearly important to Wigan and the way that they play. So good luck to him. 100 tries is a hell of an achievement.
Badine Thompson has come in, another one of these refugees to bolster the Leeds ranks, and he should have had a day off or something. He's training more or something I read today, which, well, what would you do anyway? Just go look around Tropical World or something? I don't know. So he's training hard and ready for when Leeds play again and whenever that is in the future.
He's a solid acquisition. Is what they need. It works for all parties. Comparatively speaking, he's a relatively cheap pickup. He's an overseas player who otherwise Leeds wouldn't have had space for, but he needs to play a certain number of games to get a visa for next year for whoever he may end up playing for. So it sort of works for everybody. But again, it was a 7 out of 10 performance. He was solid. He did a lot of work. He tried to look after his centre. And for a position where Leeds seem to have a lot of cover, suddenly they don't have much. So it's a good pickup for both parties.
Before we get on to Saturday's games, you'll be pleased to know, by the way, Luke Menzies, who used to be a person but now doesn't exist. He's getting lots of rave reviews for his performances in America. You'll read about those in the next issue of 4020, not the one that's out, because there's nothing else on TV at the minute. Huddersfield, I don't know if they're just unlucky or they can't win games at the minute, but that's 2 weeks in a row. No, 2 games in a row, rather. They've lost by a point. Warrington edging them out 19 points to 18. What do we make of this one?
I think, Huddersfield are. I think they've always been that team that you don't not forget about, because that's not the right way to put it. But they are a very good squad. They just this seems to happen to them, doesn't they? They seem to be pipped to the post, so to speak, quite often. But they are a strong squad. Now, I think their performance was, was good. Yes, there were elements that you'd change or they've got room for improvement as such. And there was 20 minutes where that Warrington were down to 12 men that they could have exploited a little bit better. But generally, I don't think it's a performance to be necessarily ashamed of. I think Ashton Golden's great. I think, Kujo coming back in. There's lots of things where they're resetting themselves again, and lots of things for improvement. But it's just, with Leeds and then with Warrington, it's just that I think it's better to lose by a bigger margin than that 1 pointer. But a loss is a loss, isn't it? And I'm hoping they get their break soon, to be fair.
I don't know. I felt more positive after the Wakefield game against Wigan than the Wakefield against the Catalans, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
I think there's a change at Huddersfield that you can see. They're starting to play in the image of their coach a little bit. They are hard to beat. They have got resilience about them. They did have some real misfortune with injuries. Clearly, if you're going to talk about decisions retrospectively, then there's a couple that went against them that have been admitted now. The control perhaps should have gone the other way, and that clearly would have changed the result that finished only 1 point between the teams. And I guess we need to talk about Ben Murdoch-Masila and should he have been sent off or not. And irrespective of the injury that Matty English suffered and the fact that he was taken out of the game, at normal speed, at the ground, watching it looked as though it was a high and slightly reckless tackle. And had it been a red card at the time, I don't think too many people would have complained about that. And that's just that's unfortunate for Huddersfield, because they lose twice, don't they? They lose a player who can't come back, but not only that, one of their interchange slots at a time when the game is speeding up and you need as many interchanges as you can get. But also, if he does subsequently get a ban, and we're recording this before it's likely his 2-match ban is brought in, Huddersfield don't benefit from that. But I think there is something about them at the moment. I think people like Michael Lawrence are realising now that because of the experience that he's got, because of the games that he's played, because there is starting to be a core of local juniors that really look to people like him, that his senior leadership role is reaping rewards. Adam O'Brien clearly is a workhorse. You're never going to get less than a 6 or 7 out of 10, and the occasional 8 or 9 because he is utterly dependable. Aidan Caesar has given them structure. They're clearly missing Lee Gaskill for the next 5 or 6 weeks, who started quite well. They've got threat. Darnell McIntosh is an exciting player if you can get the ball to him. Leroy Cudjoe coming back again, brilliant. He talking about people who were coming back from knee reconstruction. It was his first game in 14 months, and clearly, if he'd got the timing of the pass right out to the wing, Huddersfield would have won it. It was that close to winning. So I think whilst he will have shaken his head and bitten his tongue a little bit, actually there's probably more for Simon Woolford to work on than actually there is Steve Price. Because I think Warrington just seemed to flatter to deceive a little bit. Again, Widdop had his best game in those colours. But to me, it's not Widdop and Austin having their best game. It's like it's one or the other. And that isn't yet a partnership, I don't think. So, yeah, if it was me, I'd be reviewing that as Simon Woolford, the happier of the two coaches. And to all those people that think that's because I have an anti-bias, behave.
Well, no, it's also the fact that you've got to remember that, was it last 20 minutes they had no interchanges? And Michael
Yeah.
Lawrence is playing way more minutes than he would normally anyway. They're playing against a very fast side in terms of, the level that Warrington are playing at. And you're right about the Warrington half situation. I think they're both leaders rather than, I know it's generally better to have one kind of gameplay leader and one ball handler. I think the two of them both like to take charge a little bit. Widdop, when he was in the NRL, was very much playing his game. Austin very much likes to play his way, and I'm not sure that that's merged very well yet. And I don't think the roles between the two of them have been clearly defined as to who is going to essentially call the shots, because that's what one of the halves. There's room for both halves to call something, but I don't think it's a fluid, consistent partnership yet. But again, like I say, Huddersfield had a lot to contend with, losing players, losing interchanges, not having anything for the last. I'm sure it was about 20 minutes, wasn't it?
Mm.
That is a long time at the end of a game for a prop to stay on for any forward to kind of graft it out. So yeah, well done, Huddersfield. And also, I need to speak about the Med-Bacilla thing, because
speak about Murdoch-Masila, because obviously no one talks. No one's saying he intends to injure anyone or whatever. People get upset about this, but it's obviously reckless.
No, so he was running. So if you watch Ben, he stands still and he takes his stance. So he braces his knees, he bends his back, he puts his shoulder forward, which was without an arm initially. But that's the motion you do. You get down first, then your shoulder comes around. You don't put your shoulders out and then your arms out and then go down. It's a natural process. So if you watch it back and don't look at the actual part of contact, which is horrendous, absolutely. If you watch Ben's technique, he braces, he bends his back, he gets his shoulder brace ready, and unfortunate that he just hits it at the wrong time. And now, no, I'm not taking away the fact that it was a nasty, nasty tackle, but I also don't think the stuff you can see on social media about Ben. I mean, has anybody ever spoken to Ben Murdoch-Masila? He might be the biggest, friendliest giant that anybody could come across, and he put it out on Twitter literally nothing intended, no harm, and they've had their own he was genuinely concerned, but it was reckless in the sense that his timing was off, his technique maybe be a bit questionable. But if you actually watch back and watch him, he plants his feet before the tackle is made, and that's where the error maybe needs to be, that he hasn't kept his toes up. I don't know, whatever, but it was just an unfortunate positioning of his shoulder to the head.
Unfortunate.
Said the prop for.
Well, there we go.
In mitigation.
There we go. I am the worst tackler in the world. So
I was about to say they could use you as an expert witness, but now you've said that, I think they'd probably throw you out of the dock, wouldn't they? But
no, I just grab and use my weight to pull people down. I don't have a hit in me, so I think I've accidentally made a high tackle a couple of times and somebody's tried to duck under me rather than me actually doing it. So no, and it's not a nice tackle, and I'm not taking any away from the fact that it was it's pretty reckless in the sense that it poor technique or whatever, I don't know, but it was vicious, it was nasty, and you never want to see a player go down like that or be stretchered off.
I don't think there's many times in sport where you can say there was definite intent, apart from when Roy Keane wrote in his autobiography that there was.
When Tommy Makinson grabbed somebody's
testicles, yeah.
Yeah. So
I think you can use the term squirrel and nuts if you really must.
I was going to be worse than that. I had to stop myself. I had to remember my company in the audience.
No.
That was the problem. And I'm not saying it wasn't intentional, but yeah, it's just difficult, isn't it? It's rugby at the end of the day, and no, you don't want to see injuries, you don't want to see knees hurt, you don't want to see ankles go, you don't want to see people be knocked out, you don't want to see high tackles, but it's going to happen, and it's just. And if it didn't happen, people would be like, "Oh, this game's so boring. You can't win. You're never going to win." So I'm just going to be on the defensive.
Just one final point to call back to halfbacks. The greatest example I've ever seen in sport of someone running the show and telling their partner exactly where to stand and what to do. And this will be a bizarre comparison because we're talking rugby league here, is the London 2012 Olympics, the mixed doubles tennis final. Andy Murray pretty much telling Laura Robson where to stand and what to do for the whole match. And they nearly won, but he couldn't quite carry it to that gold medal. So Andy Murray is the person the halfback should watch.
Maybe Warrington should sign those up as halfbacks then.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, he's a former world number one.
Yeah, I think Andy Murray would be great on the field, wouldn't he?
Yeah. It did amuse me when Judy Murray was on Celebrity MasterChef and they described her as celebrity tennis coach. I'm thinking, the problem is, you're right, but she's known more to being Andy Murray's mum. But,
Yeah.
Well done to her for that. 2 world number ones she's producing in her family, which is more than the Lawn Tennis Association's ever done. Away from tennis, because I don't know much about that. And if we start talking about Judy Murray too longer, I'll talk about something I shouldn't talk on this programme. Let's talk about the game of the weekend, because it was a game and it kicked things off. I don't listen to Fighting Talk anymore, but I can imagine you could have the best person on that possibly Mr. Kellner. He would not be able to defend the indefensible. I'm not going to be able to do it either. 58-0. Can't wait for the game on the telly at the weekend. Riesling's suspended now for the crusher tackle. They did it without Izzy Folau, who, congratulations to him and Mrs. Folau. And having seen Tiger Woods' son won a golf tournament at the weekend at the age of 11, Folau Jr. might be a very talented sports person, whatever they choose to do in the future with that bloodline. But David Mead came into the side, was very good. The Catalan Dragons were very good, although critics may say they didn't necessarily need to be very good.
I think let's talk about the Dragons to start with.
Let's just talk about the Dragons. They didn't play anyone. But
I think two things have changed for the Dragons. One is the new rules have almost forced them to play more rugby. I think that the recruitment that they've done and the fact that Steve McNamara does like to start building his side around a big pack has almost changed because of the landscape that we're now playing in, and there is a greater need and desire to move the ball. And I think that really suits the Dragons, and it always did. It's that, Gaelic way of playing. I think having James Maloney in the halfbacks, having Sam Tompkins as the link, having a brilliant finisher in Tom Davis, who is another one who's come back from a horrendous knee injury and is looking fantastic at the moment. Really, really great brand of rugby that is suiting the new rules, which I'm not sure they would have done if we hadn't had these new rules. I think the other thing is they've always been vulnerable to the travel aspect. And actually, this is helping them, because instead of flying over for a couple of days and staying in a hotel and wandering around the city and, turning up at a ground a couple of hours early and all that, what they're doing now is they're meeting for breakfast in Perpignan on the day of the game. They're getting on a plane, they're staying together, the plane is landing, they're being taken directly to the ground, they're in lockdown in the ground in a room, that room is their changing room, they go out of the change room onto the field. It's almost as if by concentrating that whole process, it's cured them of a lot of the travel aspect. It's less time travelling, but it's actually a closer bonding time. And as Steve McNamara was saying,
it's also very rigid and there's such a routine to it that's actually probably what suits players better, because you know exactly what you're doing and when you're doing it and how you're doing it, and there's no room for any discrepancy and what the plan is, and that I think is also what suits it.
And there's no hanging around in airports, and there's no hour and a half's drive from Perpignan when you land or take off from Barcelona. It's almost like it's a military operation, and that's suiting them. But the way that they're playing as well is just flamboyant at the moment. And if you allow them to play, they're going to hurt you. And unfortunately, talking about the opposition they were playing, they allowed them to play. And, I'm not going to criticise anybody at the moment, because as we've said at the beginning of the programme, playing is more important than anything at the moment. Being there to fulfil your fixtures is the sole aim of the sport in 2020. Wakefield looked disjointed. Um, Now, I don't know where in the team that you would say that emanates from. Clearly, if you make a lot of changes on a weekly basis, if you're getting a number of injuries and you don't have the same level of cover, if your halfback combination is changing every week, it's going to look worse than it probably is. Was not a great performance. Too many players off their game. I don't understand defensively why, if you know you've got faster men on the outside, you surrender the ground to them, so that the rainbow pass, as it's now called, prevalent in the NRL, and certainly Sam Tompkins did it a couple of times. If you are going to free faster men on the outside, all shuffle over a bit in your back line and hold your ground, because if you offer the outside, Tom Davis is going to burn you.
But that's a basic defensive thing, though. You should always have your man. Like, you should number off very well, or that's your fullback's job to make sure you're numbering off, so there isn't that gap, there isn't that space, and you should all have that one-to-one kind of defensive structure, surely.
Yeah, I just think they don't look like a team that are communicating at the moment amongst themselves. And one of the other things you do get to hear and appreciate a little bit more at a ground behind closed doors is you hear which teams are vocal. Even in warm-up, you hear who the leaders are in teams when things are going against you. Who is the person that's going to stand up and rally the troops. And at the moment, from the outside looking in, there aren't too many putting a hand up to do that for Wakefield. That Matty Ashurst is a great player, but he's not a vocal player. So for everything that he can bring to a team by way of his 40 tackles, you need somebody, you need your Danny Kermond out there, or you need your Danny Brough at his peak out there cajoling and admonishing and just moving the team to where they need to be, reminding them of their responsibilities. And with the greatest respect to Wakefield at the moment, there aren't too many people putting a hand up doing that. Jacob Miller is not a demonstrative guy. He's another one, give me the ball when I want it and I need it and I'll try and do something. But he's not the sort of bloke that's going to go around and say to David Fafita, I want you to take the next 5 hit-ups because we're in a bit of trouble here. I just think there are some issues within the squad about who are the leaders, who are the communicators, what do we do when things start going wrong. And the other thing about that result is it's indicative of some of the other blowouts that we've had. If you're playing a team that are not making a mistake, you just cannot get the ball off them. And if your confidence is waning by the set of 6 and you're giving the ball away and Sam Tompkins is making you pay virtually every time he has his hands on the ball, you're out of the game. You can't get back in it.
Yeah.
You obviously fancied a rest this week and didn't fancy the trip to Huddersfield, Sam, by tripping Ryan Hampshire. So he's off this week. As mentioned, Riesling gets 2 games for that crusher tackle. Sam Mower also misses 2 games as well. Busy night last night, or busy day rather, for the disciplinary panel. I guess the only positive for Wakefield is it can't be as bad this week, or you'd hope not. It's on BBC One rather than Sky. But you would hope things would be better this week, but we shall see. Chris Chester in the press conference talking about bringing in some of the younger players on the fringe to try and maybe give a kick up the backside of some of the senior players who weren't quite at the races on Saturday. But
is the danger with that you need to put the senior players out there again and perhaps work on what they need to be good at rather than throw pressure on the youngsters in a must-win game, if you like? There's no second chances this week, so would you go with the core of your experienced guys and say, right, that's your second chance? I don't know.
Well, I think
you can't win favourites.
But you think you do that, like you say, you said that there's nobody really taking charge of Wakefield, and there's no out-and-out leader. No, we might not be able to see that from a spectator point of view, and there might be somebody on there that's trying to influence the game or to influence the players. But I think to lead with a younger squad going into this week is also dangerous, because you might just get it that the younger squad are coming through. They're like, yeah, this is my chance. This means it all, win or take, win or lose, sorry. and it may pay off in their favour. But I think you need to have a bench that you can rotate on, and either start with your more experience, and if it's not working, mix it around a little bit. But to make too many changes now going into such an important game, and you've got to assume that Chris wants to go through to the next round of the Challenge Cup, but maybe he doesn't. Maybe the situation at the minute means that it'll be one less thing for Wakefield to worry about. But I don't see many teams wanting to do that. But is that an element? I don't know. Would he rather use this game and not go through to Challenge, next round of the Challenge Cup, and use it as not a training game, because that sounds like you're downgrading it, but see how other players fare, and maybe it might win, and you might go through, and it might pay off for you, and if not, it doesn't, and then you live and learn for the rest of the league season. So I don't know.
People talk about us being negative. I did leave the one of the Wakefield fan groups on Facebook this weekend because it was just, I just thought, you know what, I can't be bothered with it. I know we've been awful today. I know we've lost 58-0, but no. I mean, and look, Cass had to switch from playing Hull to playing Saints, which was not an easy switch. Wakefield had to switch not just opponents, but days they were playing as well. And obviously, you'd rather play Catalans and St Helens. But you mentioned earlier, Danika, about structuring your week and whatever. Wakefield, obviously, changing days late on, would have had their training plan for the week all mapped out. So that also had to be thrown away as well. I'm not making that as an excuse for losing 50.
No, it is an excuse. It is not an excuse, but it is a
reason.
It's a variable, isn't it, in your week? Like, when does this type of playing style become the norm for them as well? So it's a variable that you don't want, particularly on a team that need consistency. So excuse me, it plays into it. It's not an excuse, it's just an extra variable that people maybe need to consider. That, these people on Facebook and Twitter and that are typing all of this. Now, I've seen a lot of things about some of the Leeds players and about dropping balls and stuff. You're not on that field catching that ball. You're not good enough to be out there playing. And whether you think your player is good or not, you're still not as good as them. So yes, they're going to make mistakes. We're not all perfect, but you have to. There's so many more things to consider that they wouldn't even get the grasp of at the minute, because training and testing and traveling and the timings of the day, the change of teams, that all adds a little bit of maybe a 1 or 2%, but maybe the 1 or 2% is all that a player needs to then lose their confidence. So there. And I nearly stuck my tongue out on Blue Raspberry, then, but I stopped myself.
Well, they've been perfect.
And you want to know that you'll get the slice of Papa John's that you want, and not that flavour that nobody likes.
I mean, I don't think there's a flavour I don't particularly like. Apart from margarita, only weirdos get margarita.
Yeah, you want something on it, don't you? Where do you stand on pineapple?
I'm not a pineapple on a pizza type of gal. I'll eat it though.
Pineapple's good. Yeah, pineapple's good. Ham and pineapple works.
I'd never pick it, but I would still eat it. If it's the only thing left, I'll still eat it. So I'm not upset by it.
Papa John's, if you want to send us some free pizzas, you know where we are. These are the big debates. Yeah.
Also, their chicken bites and potato tots are perfect. Not that, obviously, my training diet doesn't allow for that.
Obviously.
But I just heard.
Sophie told
Papa
me.
John's
No, she didn't.
Papa John's got hit me up. No, Sophie's trying out for the Monday to Wednesday eat out to help out, hasn't she?
Yeah. Big fan of Rishi, as will I when my money comes through from the government next week for being self-employed. Keeping my head above water. I'm trying to think of anything else that's going on in the world of sport, the world of our sport, that we need to mention, other than the utter hilariousness of the, as Andrew Foster called it on the show we did last week, the Ralph Rimmer COVID-19 Cup, which is a complete shambles. What, 5 teams have entered now? Just call it off. Just call it.
Express their interest. What I think was interesting was Eamon McManus's statements this week about the competition can't be allowed to go with 11 teams next year, that credibility would be completely undermined, and that he isn't even averse to a debate about if Toronto do find new backers and owners, that they get a share of the money and it's equitable. I think to be having those discussions at the moment and to be so overtly coming out and being, nailing his colours to a certain mast. I think it's a very important time at the moment for those who govern Super League, that there is a clear division now between some of the clubs that want to look at going forward progressively and some that want to shrink back to something to keep what they've got. And I'd watch out for that. I think there's a lot of play in that story at the moment. It seems as though it's Leeds and St Helens who are leading the call for 12 clubs and sharing the resource. And once your power base starts to shift to the big players, changes in the air.
We need to get that takeover sorted sooner rather than later, though, don't we? Because the longer it goes, the less chance are going to have us signing any decent players, especially with Wigan signing pretty much everyone going at the moment, and Ottawa. They need some time to actually build a squad for next year.
I just think, you cannot rush a consortium coming forward, because then you can't win, can you? You're accused of not doing your due diligence properly. But yes, I think a decision about 12 teams needs to be taken sooner rather than later. And then you're in the realms of, if it isn't Toronto, how on earth do you get that 12th team? Because you're talking licensing rather than on-field promotion.
The winners of the Ralph Rimmer COVID-19 Cup. It'd be hilarious if Dewsbury beat Bradford in the final. That'd be hilarious, wouldn't it?
But where would they play that game? Because there'd be home ground for both teams.
Headingley, right there. it's the natural home of finals. Played at Odsal, which I know we might be going back to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but not next year though, because it's not ready. Because it'll take about £7 billion worth of funding to, maybe £16 million worth of money could fill up the cracks in the concrete and stuff. I'm being mischievous now. So
there's only one game to predict, and I think
we don't need to predict that.
It's probably not worth it.
But if you'll buy 20, there you go. Win.
There you go.
We're off in the hat, and we'll play the winner of Castleford and Hull, which will be played, after the final. It's like the Football Champions League has reached the semi-final stage. They've already started the first round for next season. No, this season. I've lost. I think we're all lost, or maybe it is just me.
Blame COVID.
Yeah.
Go and have a lie down.
Yeah, I think I will do. The magazine is out now.
The magazine is in the shops.
Yes. I'm looking forward to reading it when I get my post. Danika, what are you going to write about next month? I mean, not that we won't have you on before then, because we probably will do.
Well, I think there's a meeting, isn't there, on this week, Thursday time, about the women's game? You'd know more about that than me.
Oh, no, I don't know anything. I actually don't know about that. So that's...
maybe. I don't know. I've just heard on the grapevine that there's a meeting on Thursday or whatever. So maybe we'll have more to discuss there. I can only hope. Otherwise, I'll be crying into my column. And it'll be
food,
tear-shaped column. I can tell you lots about food I've tried out. I'm potentially popping away again at the end of the month. Camping, everything that's unrelated to rugby league.
Much like the rest of the magazine,
then. I'll be back at school by then.
Maybe you'll have kids there as well. Who knows?
Oh, I mean, I could talk to you about exam results and the government, but again,
people don't like it when we get political, do we? You see.
Well, there's plenty that are going on outside of rugby league to write about, but hopefully we might have some news on some of the women's games. That'd be good. And there's still games going on in Australia for the women, and there's plenty of bits and pieces I'm sure I can scrape together and talk rubbish about as per.
And there will be some positive news later this week, because the tickets for the World Cup the prices for the tickets for the World Cup will be announced later in the week. So that'll be something to continue to look forward to.
Obviously, yes.
Yeah, I think I've worked it out, and if I'm right, I could go to every game of the women's tournament next year.
So
that might be a thing.
I feel really bad for. Is it Australia? or New Zealand. Maybe
No, we
both.
never feel bad for Australia.
Don't ever feel bad for Australia.
No, because I think all of their games are played at York, which is going to be the New York Stadium, which is fine. Is it York?
Actually,
Yeah.
no, we should send them to Rotherham and to the New York Stadium and not turn up at actual York.
Yeah, but
I think they're the only.
I think they're the only two teams that don't actually move around different stadiums, which is not a bad thing in the sense that it can be a nice stadium, but it's also nice to travel around.
Yeah. In a world
as
you
well.
want to experience different things, don't you? I guess, yeah.
Yeah, especially like Headingley and stuff.
What?
Home of the gods, that is.
I mean, two good things to read for anybody who hasn't yet. John Dutton's written something about the power of the World Cup to unite and how it's going to need to do that. Worth reading. It's on the World Cup site and or his LinkedIn page. And a great piece in the Monthly magazine, which is Australian, but you can get one free piece without subscribing, by Lech Blaine about the class war within Rugby League and what Peter V'landys has done to bring it back to the people. It's a really good piece, and it's got some resonance over here as well. It's a long read. We're big fans of long reads.
Power to the people.
Read.
Well, that's it then. There is no more. We might have some guests next week. Who knows? And enjoy the one game. We've waited all this time for Rugby League, and now we've got one game. Like,
it is what it is. Just roll with it and enjoy it.